We are going to start shortly. We're letting people come in the room and we'll start in a minute.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
I'll start about 3 after. So I have about 4 minutes and then we'll get started because we know that this will be a jam-packed with great information and we want to value you all's time and energy today. So thank you for joining us. As we wait, if you'd like to share where you're joining us from, as our community is very, very vast all over the South. So we love to say Happy New Year, and you give a shout out to the communities that you are representing today or organizations. All right, West Virginia, we see you. Next time we have to start playing our playlist in this space that we have, because we have a whole playlist for Southern Black girls and women. So we'll make sure that that happens in future Sage circles. All right, we'll wait about 1 more minute and then we'll get started. All right, we're going to get started. My name is Joy Webb. I am the Network Engagement Manager for Southern Black Girls and Women's Consortium. We are so happy to be able to have this space where we come together as a community of Black women who are working with Black girls and share some shared learnings from some of our partners and friends in the network and the ecosystem that we have. Today, at the top of the year, we are excited to have Lauren Carson, who is the founder and executive director of Black Girl Smile. I'm going to let her do her own introduction because I could not do her justice, but we are excited to have her here and let her share some things with us on coping skills for self-help and supporting our employees with mental health and leaders during this time and all the time. No time like the present to get that going. So, Lauren, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Joy. Hi, everyone. Welcome. One thing I do want to share prior to us getting started is I am currently traveling for work. And a little fun fact about this trip is I have my 3-year-old with me. So if you see me kind of going on mute or stopping for a moment, it is just to make sure he is occupied during our presentation. I am very excited to have everyone here. I think that this is such a good way to kind of start off the year as a reset, making sure that we are taking care of ourselves as leaders, and in the various roles that we play. As Black women, we pour into so many people in different spaces, and the best ways to ensure that we are at our best is by ensuring that we are taking care of our mental health and well-being. I'm also going to share some information about best ways to support employee mental health. This is really kind of across the board. So I would also include in there board members, volunteers, anyone that you're kind of supporting in various leadership roles within your community or your organization. So let's get started. A little bit about me, kind of the lens through which I provide content and information. I do a lot of speaking, advocacy work, but I have lived experience with clinical depression, anxiety, depression, and 2 suicide attempts. I have been working in behavioral health for close to 12 years now. I am very, very, very passionate about people leading their best mentally healthy lives, really focusing on the best ways to access resources, the way to tap into the positive and healthy resources that we have within ourselves. So very excited to dive into this content. So a little bit about some of the objectives of what we'll be covering today, and this will be a little interactive. So hopefully you guys have the space to engage with the chat as well. First, we'll be focusing on identifying self-care methods and coping skills that you can implement as a leader. Understanding what warning signs we should look out for, because it can be really difficult. At many places, we're kind of in the weeds of things, and it can be difficult to recognize when we may be struggling with our mental health. And then we'll talk about some informal and formal policies to support the mental health of leaders within your organizations or your companies. Okay. So first, I always feel like it's good to ground the conversation in just some statistics, like why are we having this conversation? One sec, sweet boy. So a recent study showed that 65% of senior business leaders have suffered from mental health conditions, including anxiety, depression, and things around stress, and that this can really contribute to how we show up in the workplace. About 58% of business leaders say that within their positions is really hard to talk about mental health. And about 1 in 4 people feel less supported with their mental health since becoming senior leaders or in management within their organizations or companies. You got it. Good job. But one of the ways that we can ensure that we're taking care of ourselves and we're leading from a positive and healthy place is to really focus on leading mentally well so that we can all succeed within our companies, our organizations, and really maximize our impact. So before we dive right in, I am going to pose a question for you guys to share in the chat. Why do you think that the mental health of leaders matters? You can share just kind of your general thoughts on why is it important to focus on mental health for leaders? If you can share some responses in the chat, and I'll read those off. Don't be shy. Why do you think that the mental health of leaders matters?
We're not shy. We're just thinking about.
Okay. That's fair. Manage work-life balance. Yes, you have to be able to take care of yourself before you take care of others. Yes, very true. I don't know if you guys have ever had moments where you feel like your patience is really thin, or you're not responding well to others. That could be due to some stress or some anxiety that you may have going on. And that can really show up for us as leaders because there is a lot of pressure on your plate. Overwhelming responsibilities, ability to be sensitive to the mental health of others. Exactly. Thank you guys so much for sharing. So it is very vast and expansive why it is important to focus on the mental health of leaders such as yourselves. So first, let's dive into coping skills. So before we dive right into, these are the coping skills that you should be using, which are healthy and positive. First, let's kind of define what coping skills means and what we're talking about today. So coping skills, techniques or mechanisms, these are strategies that people often use in the face of stress or trauma, and they help us to manage painful or difficult emotions. So in those moments where we find ourselves feeling anxious, or we're feeling a lot of stress, or we've experienced some sort of trauma, these are the skills that we intentionally lead into to help us navigate those difficult situations. So let's look at some of the positive and healthy coping skills. And in many cases, we can probably relate to some of the negative, but also some of the positives. So some of the negative coping skills that we at times will find ourselves leaning into are things like isolation. That could even be things like not asking for help, feeling kind of this victim mindset. Also things around sleep deprivation, when things are ruminating and kind of keeping us up. Also lashing out, not leaning into work-life balance, and reacting from a place of frustration or anger. And these can be very normal ways to respond to stress or anxiety or trauma, but they aren't always the most healthy and positive ways to respond in these situations. So on the flip side, some of the positive ways that we can respond to difficult situations, that can be things like delegating tasks and responsibilities, asking for help, saying no, leaning into exercise or just moving our body, and focusing on things like mindfulness, meditation, or even just taking a break. All of these things can feel very difficult to do as a leader, but are really pivotal and important to making sure that we're grounding ourselves and that we're navigating from the most healthy place with leading our teams, our organizations, and any departments as well. So now that we've looked briefly at some of positive and healthy coping skills, I'm wondering, what are some of the positive coping skills that resonate with you that are on this list, or other positive coping skills that you currently utilize or want to utilize more in the new year? And again, our coping skills are going to be the techniques, the mechanisms that we really lean into when we're dealing with difficult situations. And for each of that's going to look quite different, but we have to be really intentional about making sure we're implementing positive and healthy coping skills. Delegating more. I love that. Thank you, Dia. Anyone else? One of the coping skills that I have really tried to lean into in the last few years is taking a break. For me, that looks different in various situations, but I find that if something is not an automatic yes, that I sit on things for 24 hours before I respond. I'm sure a lot of you guys get a lot of requests, a lot of asks of you, and at times we're just very quick to say yes. And I find, especially as Black women and girls, there's kind of this people-pleasing aspect where, we want to say yes, we want to show up, but we have to also make sure that we're honoring what's best for us. So taking a break, I love that. Rayani talked about taking a sabbatical, taking a break during the day, 9 a.m. for mindful moments, and then 3 p.m. for a productive pause. I love that. Alicia talked about self-care, meditating, stepping back. Yes. And what I really encourage people to do in those moments where it feels most difficult to lean into positive coping skills, those are the moments we need to lean into them the most. Thank you guys so much for sharing. So next we're going to talk about self-care. I think we had a few others. We only talked about when I came back, I put a similar daily pauses on my calendar. I love that, being really intentional about making sure you're creating space for things like taking a break. So next we're going to talk about self-care. Self-care is too often it has kind of become commercialized. It has become kind of a buzzword for the good, but also at times for the bad. Because we really want to normalize. Self-care is not something that you should just do one-off. I was in a presentation probably about 2 years ago, and someone mentioned self-care should be a lifestyle. And that was just an aha moment for me, because self-care really should be something that is automatic, something that we implement all the time, especially as Black women and girls. Excuse me, 1 second. Okay, here, you can have the phone. Nope. Here you go. Okay, you can play the phone. Sorry about that, guys. Self-care is really something that we should be implementing within our lifestyle. It should be something that's really automatic. And I think it's so important for Black women, especially because we often are taught intentionally or unintentionally to pour from an empty cup. If anyone's ever heard that saying, that means we will give until we have nothing left, and we will still try to give. Self-care are the little things that help refill our cup. So for today's purposes, the definition that we're going to be working from is self-care is the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during periods of stress, trauma, or anxiety. So what does it look like to really implement self-care? Self-care for leaders, I really like this quote. Successful leaders make self-care a priority so that they can perform at their best. Leaders who fail to take time for self-care tend to burn out quickly. So some of the ways that we can really implement self-care, especially within our work, is making sure that we're setting boundaries, prioritizing physical health, rest and recharging. So that means, trying to strike much of a balance between work and our personal lives, time management, and give and extend grace. So I want to toss this back to you guys. Why is it important for leaders such as yourselves to practice self-care? If you don't mind sharing some responses in the chat. And again, why is it important for leaders to practice self-care? I would say one of the biggest ways that I've seen it be important to emphasize self-care is you start to create a culture around it. I've seen my team implement self-care in their personal lives and their professional lives as well, and kind of creating that culture around self-care. Someone shared, so we are not getting to a place of burnout. Exactly. Leaders share so much of their time and talent with others that it is necessary to fill our own cup. Yes, exactly. It's just really important for us to make sure we're taking care of self, because as leaders, we're giving so much to others. We're giving so much to our team, to our internal partners, our external partners, to the organizations and companies that we lead. So it's really important that we make sure we take care of ourselves, and self-care is a huge part of that. Anyone else want to share?
I think when you practice self-care as a leader, you are also more inclined to
um, encourage it to those who are around you, those who are working with you, because not only do leaders or managers or directors or whatever, not only do they burn out, but the people working with you also burn out. And if you're consciously taking the time to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, you will likely encourage those around you and make it available to those around you. Whether it's intentional with the organization or just, hey, take 2 days off. And it's not against your whatever. You're more sensitive to everybody else needing to also take some time for self-care.
Yes. And I love that you share that. I think it's really important for us to make sure that we don't always just
Please know you already shared he's a 3-year-old. It is what it is, and you have to do what you have to do. So don't have to apologize every time you come back because he needs attention.
Yeah. I had to I locked myself in the bathroom earlier, so it may come to that. But I think it's really important, and I know I have been guilty of this before, is we will extend this grace to others, but we don't always give it to ourselves. Like we'll tell others, hey, make sure you're taking care of yourselves, take time off if you need it, but we don't always feel comfortable doing that. But it's really important for us to practice what we preach, and making sure that we're showing up for ourselves just as much as we're showing up for others. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I want to highlight kind of some of the signs that we can look out for that potentially we need to focus more intentionally around our mental health and well-being as leaders. So things like inconsistent leadership behavior, this is something that we can definitely look at from a introspective lens. But also getting feedback from those that we work with as well. Feeling overwhelmed or showing a lack of empathy. So things may be going on with your team and you're not able to show empathy or show up for others in ways that you want to, and the culture that you want to espouse through your organization. Leaders that start to lose respect, if you're experiencing symptoms of burnout. And then I would say this is probably one of the bigger ones that we have to pick up on. What are the things for us personally that indicate that our mental health and well-being are starting to struggle? And for me, the lack of attention to detail or issues with focusing, those are things that for me are the warning flag to indicate that I need to lean more intentionally into my self-care, my coping skills, and potentially accessing some resources. So I really encourage everyone to not always just look at a list of like, what are the symptoms, what are the warning signs, but really start to recognize what it looks like for you personally, so that when that starts to pop up, you can really start to evaluate and be really proactive about your next steps to ensure that you're taking care of your mental health. And what are signs that leaders are prioritizing their mental health? So like, what are the things that we can look for to pat ourselves on the back, to, smile, to, just really realize that we're doing well, we're doing good by ourselves, but also others. So that looks like appropriately delegating and responding to various situations in the workplace. I know we're all throwing a lot at us. We're constantly putting out fires. So what does it look like to be able to respond to those situations in appropriate and healthy ways? Being able to show empathy and grace to peers and employees, striking a work-life balance, modeling some of these positive and healthy practices for employees, but also for our peers. We talked about taking breaks, having healthy boundaries, also being able to hear and receive feedback in constructive ways, and then being able to set goals and really track the progress towards your goals is really important as well. And these are all signs that we can look for to say, hey, I'm on the right track, I'm doing well. And I'm taking care of my mental health amongst the backdrop of my leadership and many responsibilities. And I want to highlight some of the resources for leaders as it pertains to your mental health. Some of these are going to be more kind of crisis related. Some of these are non-crisis. And I would really encourage everyone to look into some of the non-crisis resources so that you can be really proactive about some of the things that are going on. So we have things like FMLA. A lot of us work for smaller organizations or run smaller organizations, so we may be human resources, but evaluating what it looks like to maybe have a human resource expert or specialist on your board, or someone that you're consulting with. Building in policies around short-term and long-term disability, having confidential lines, and then looking at various mental health treatments. So things like inpatient, outpatient programs, individual therapy, group therapy, or support groups. If anyone's looking for any of these resources, please feel free to follow up with me afterwards. I have a very extensive list, and try to stay really attuned and up to date on specifically providers of color and women providers of color that are offering things like group therapy, support groups, things like that. I also always encourage people to recognize some of the non-traditional resources that we can also tap into. So that's things like mentors, life coach, career coach, implementing things like mental health days, evaluating what it looks like to lean into peer supports, but also various trainings that you can implement for you or for your team as well. So I'm just going to pause there and see if anyone has any questions before I pivot to kind of the employee side of this. So the first half of the presentation was really focused on the ways that we as leaders can focus on our mental health and well-being. And then the next half, we're going to focus on ways that we can support our employees as well. So I just want to pause and create space if anyone has any questions or wants to make any comments before we pivot slightly. Okay, we will continue. Thanks, guys. So the second half, some of the objectives that we're going to go over: understanding the benefit and importance of supporting our employee mental health, identifying formal and informal policies and procedures that we can utilize to empower our employee mental health, and then just some cultural and gender considerations when prioritizing the mental health, specifically of Black women employees. So why is it important to focus on employee mental health? A lot of money is lost each year because we don't focus, specifically in the US, we don't really focus very heavily on making sure that our employees feel supported, even in the workplace when it comes to their mental health and well-being. It is a lot more difficult to tell our employees, like, hey, you have things going on, like, you know, it should be parked at the door, and when you're at work, you should just focus on work. We all know and probably have been in multiple situations where it's not that simple. We can't turn it off or not focus on a family member who's sick or financial woes or whatever it is that we have going on in our lives. It's not so difficult to just turn that off at the door. Where's Michael? Okay, thank you, sweet boy. So some of the benefits of supporting employee mental health, one, it improves the overall employee health. That can also help to lower our healthcare costs. It can prevent burnout. It can also increase productivity and efficiency, decrease turnover, and increase the buy-in and engagement for our employees. A lot of us with running smaller organizations or companies, it's really important that our employees are heavily engaged and have a lot of buy-in to our mission, our impact, and making sure that they are there fully, and they're able to support us in their roles. We have to make sure that they feel supported and that we are providing them the resources to ensure that they're mentally healthy and well. So when employee mental health is not a priority, it could look like things like high turnover, higher healthcare costs, decreased productivity and efficiency. We see more absenteeism, less buy-in or investment into the company or personal success, higher mental health distress. And this also can lead to employee or team conflict as well. You okay? Okay. You're okay, sweet boy. Okay, come sit with mama. So how do you believe, like specifically looking at something like the pandemic, because we're coming out of a pandemic, and the reality is, in many ways, people want to say that it is over, done with, we can wipe our hands of it, but there's a lot of lasting impact for us personally, as communities, as organizations, with the pandemic. So taking an example like the pandemic, how do you believe that has impacted employee mental health? If you guys don't mind sharing a few responses in the chat. Again, that's how do you believe the pandemic has impacted employee mental health?
Well, I'm gonna share, but I'm not gonna put in the chat. I'm gonna just talk.
Yeah.
I think that the pandemic has impacted employee mental health because a lot of employees were at home with their family, which could be good, bad, and ugly sometimes. And so the good is you got to spend time with your family. The bad is you got to spend time with your family, I guess. And it was a long time. It wasn't a 10-day, it wasn't like a vacation. It became part of your new normal. And so now to adjust back to going back to work, and then also allocating family, if you had children, young children, and particularly just how they were impacted. So you're dealing with a lot of different people's personalities and how they were affected mentally. So then you have to, especially as Black women, you have to we have to nurture everybody. So I think that impact was impacted some more because of who we are and where we stand in community.
And I want to add to where Joy was going when we were at home, and how the pandemic might have impacted the mental health. Oftentimes it is somewhat of an escape to be able to go into the office, but because of the pandemic and the huge stress that came with it, because not only did you have to limit your outside exposure and you had to stay within this bubble, the mental health, if you did go out, just the fear of, I got, I'm breathing, trying to make sure I'm okay. I mean, all of that mentally was draining. So not only did you, if you're having some issues, to Joy's point, and you had to be at home in it, I just want to lift up that sometimes actually going into the workplace could have been a release, but having to be in the same space, in the same bubble for almost 2 full years, that definitely had an impact on people, on a number of people. But just the other stress of the pandemic and not knowing from one encounter with someone or with public to the next, if you were going to be exposed to that virus. And that was so frightening. I just talked to somebody this week. It was so frightening to even think, you know what, we might not come out of this thing alive. And that was really real. Like, our office just completely shut down. And so we stayed home as much as possible. But yeah, it was, the whole pandemic thing was,
we're still reeling from it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, to your point, like there was a lot of anxiety, uncertainty, a lot of us, especially as people of color, we most likely lost someone or know someone who passed away during the pandemic. I would even say some of the, I kind of considered like the positive stressors as well. Like I know when I speak to other Black women nonprofit leaders, specifically, a lot of us started to receive more attention and funding during this time. So to your point, we're dealing with all of this stress at home, but now we have this added pressure of like really standing for our communities, even though this is what we've always wanted. Like now we have this influx of attention and funding, and those things at times can add additional pressure. We have smaller teams. So kind of across the board, there was and is still a lot for us to unpack around the pandemic and the best ways to support individuals, but also to support communities as well.
I see Trish had her hand up too.
Yes.
Sure, I acknowledge her. If you're talking, Trish, you're on mute.
Also, if you want to share in the chat, Trish, I can read that off as well.
Sorry about that. Like my fingers are stuck on my phone. I apologize. I'm Trish Brown, and I'm from Tallahassee. My pronouns are she, hers. And I'm sorry I'm late on this conversation. It's a very important conversation. I will say that, like, on the little bit that I did hear, and we're talking about being impacted by the COVID as far as trauma wise. A lot of folks asked me, during the pandemic, like, Trish, how can we help you with your trauma? And for me, it was like, if I was financially situated and I had sustainable, money coming in, then I would have like a lot of less trauma, because I wouldn't be worried about like, how am I going to feed my family? Where is my next dollar going to come from? Am I going to be able to keep a roof over my head? Am I going to be able to pay my bills? And during that time, that was the financial impact as far as like trauma in regards to being able to sustain yourself, to keep food on the table. People kept buying up everything. People like, and again, like, and yeah, excuse me, I got a little sick. I was out in the rain. There was the Black Attack event that happened up at the Capitol, and I wasn't going to let snow, rain, or anything let me miss that, because that's about our rights to Black history being in our schools. But the thing is that even when I'm talking about the bills and stuff that impacted us, the finances that impacted us as far as like trauma, because that's a whole lot of stress, health wise, as far as like getting care, that's all of that's included in finances. And if we weren't so busy worrying about our finances, we could actually take care of ourselves. So the issue, like, for me, personally, if I'm going to be testimony to this, is that like I was working with other organizations, and they couldn't financially support me during that. And it made every bill that I did have, as far as like credit card bills, that I was trying to be so proudly happy about, that I was actually being able to like pay them without them going over into major debt. I was really proud of myself. And then all of a sudden it catastrophically just, destroyed my whole credit, and it destroyed my life in parts of that. I'm a Black Lives Matter leader here in Tallahassee. So my friend Ala Batoyan got murdered during that summer, and she was an amazing activist. And that like was hard on me at the same time of I was trying to run for city commission. So dealing with trying to like engage in politics and trying to change the narrative, as a grassroots organizer, knowing that like we need people, real people in our communities at the table, that I was fighting for, and then fighting out there alongside with other organizations and people that I loved and be impacted by, you know, an activist dying or being murdered in the midst of all of it. And then COVID itself and financial debt being inflicted on you was absolute trauma. So that's my sharing.
Thank you so much for sharing. I thank you. I think you are a testimony to, there's still a lot of lasting impact and trauma and things. Paris Michael, I went to the history. You can find the, okay, there you go. There's still a lot for us to unpack, and I appreciate everyone being vulnerable, but also supportive in this space, and would encourage everyone to continue to find cathartic and healthy ways to process what has gone on. I remember being in the midst of the pandemic and telling people like we all went through a joint trauma. Okay, Paris Michael, we'll get it when Mama's done. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing.
Is there another hand up? Yeah, I think there was one more hand, Lauren.
Yes, I did. I thought, oh, I could have missed that. I think it was Roberta.
Yes, it was me. I'm not going to belabor this, but the one thing that I want to share is when you touched on, but first of all, I'm Roberta Davis, and I'm in Georgetown, Kentucky, and I run a nonprofit, Operation BU Inc. And during that time, when someone spoke about the positive side of it, for me, it was both negative, which turned into something positive. So at the time, I had been away from my home, as far as I had transferred to Mississippi and was there for 12 years. And during the pandemic, I had this pull that I needed to come home. I wasn't ready to retire, even though I had the retirement years in, but something kept telling me I needed to come home. And I didn't know if it was from the pandemic. I'm not even going to a lot of the details, but because I couldn't come back with the company in my home state, I just retired. So of course, you all know that was a time of they call it the Great Resignation, because a lot of people that had the retirement years in decided to retire. But for me, it was a little different. I wasn't ready to retire. Well, anyway, to make this long story short, once I got home and settled, I started having a lot of anxiety because I was working 12 to 16 hours a day, and to just sit still was out of my character. Well, come to find out, after I got settled at home, a week later, my only son passed. And from there, prior to his passing, pretty much the Holy Spirit said, Roberta, with your anxiety, you always wanted to develop women, girls, create a business, create a nonprofit. This was prior to the passing. So how I'm saying this negative or the worst time of my life became a blessing is that I took that energy during that time and created my business and my nonprofit. So after my son passed, that was the thing that I have to hold on to pretty much continue to build his legacy and to remember him from. So I guess from all of that, what I'm saying is, even though that was a very negative time, and it still is, and I'm gonna have to live with this for the rest of my life, I've got something positive to bring to the community out of that, like I said, worst time of my life.
Thank you so much for sharing, Roberta. I really appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing a little bit about your story, about how you find, I'm not done yet, sweet boy, I'll be done shortly, about finding impact and purpose, especially in a difficult time for you personally. Really appreciate you being here and sharing a little bit about your story, and encourage you to please keep, leaning into places like the Sage Circle so we can continue to uplift you along your journey. Is there anyone else that wanted to share? Yes, and I was going to say, Trish, thank you so much for standing up for our girls, for our Black youth. You briefly mentioned that you're doing some work around some of the educational suppression that's going on right now. So I want to make sure we uplift you with your work there as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I will kind of breeze through these. So I make sure I create some space at the end. If anyone else would like to share anything that's on your heart and mind. But just want to kind of quickly talk about ways that we can empower and support our employee mental health. Again, this is very expansive. So thinking about our volunteers, our board, those that we work with, and maybe youth leaders as well. What are ways that we can empower and support their mental health? So some formal strategies, we can look at corporate wellness programs, including mental health care, any hospital indemnity plans, disability plans, implementing, and some of these are kind of, these are things that I tell some of the corporate partners that we work with that have, the millions and billions of dollars to offer. And some of us are kind of smaller, so we may not be able to provide all of these benefits, but we can look at what it looks like to provide mental health days or training programs, or any in-house supports that we can provide through our organizations or companies. And some of the informal policies, like sometimes we aren't able to formalize a policy around mental health days, but we're able to have something like an informal mental health days policy. I also very much encourage, if you are leading anybody, doing mental health check-ins, having something like an open door policy or open Slack policy, however it is that people may need to come and be open and vulnerable about the things that they have going on so that you can support them best in their roles and responsibilities. Maybe it's even just taking a step back from a project or putting someone else on a project to help them. But making sure that we create policies and culture where people feel comfortable sharing about what's going on so that we can best support them. Also encouraging self-care activities. It can be even as small as having a puzzle in your office. Like I remember one of the companies that I worked for, we had a high pressure job and responsibilities, and we had a puzzle table that was in the middle of all of our desks so that if you needed to take a second, you could go do some puzzling or go for a walk or something like that. Taking breaks. And then this one I want to put like 3 asterisks by, because I encourage this for you internally, but I also encourage, and something we are working on with our external partners, is advocating. We'll get something to eat after Mama's done. Advocating for avoiding last minute or high pressure tasks. I'm sure all of you guys, similar to us, similar to me, get requests. Okay, I need this by end of day, or I need this by the end of the week, and it's like a grant report. I have kind of put all of our partners on notice that we will do our best to fulfill requests in a timely manner, but that I'm not going to put any extra pressure on my team to feel stress or anxiety just because someone is writing a check or just because someone is doing something that they have to get it done. We don't want to be beholden to, we don't want to hold our mental health hostage, essentially. So making sure that we are avoiding last minute asks or high pressure tasks, because that can cause a lot of stress or anxiety that is just undue. It's not necessary. Another technique that I find really helpful is having something like a mental health keyword with our employees. A lot of conversations around mental health are really starting to just now be normalized, and it takes a lot for people to be open and comfortable sharing the things that are going on in their lives, both personally and professionally. So sometimes we may just need to have a key word that indicates that someone needs to take a step back. It could be pineapples. It could be snow. It can be something that just indicates, okay, now I am triggered to know, okay, this person needs to take a step back. They have something going on and they need to take a step back from whatever they're doing. And I will check in with them later to see how I can best support them. We talked earlier about various like hybrid options for working from home or in the office, just so things can be as comfortable as possible for our employees, our volunteers, our board, but we're also taking into account how people work best and how they feel most comfortable working as well. Next is going to be advocating. Advocacy is really important. I just talked to you guys about one of the ways that you can implement advocacy, things like avoiding last minute requests. So also advocating within your teams, work-life balance, boundaries, championing new policies and culture, providing resources internally and externally. So that's like highlighting things like the crisis text line or the National Suicide Hotline or therapy networks or resources that you have through your insurance, making sure that those are not just, you know, buried in some text and a, you know, an offer letter, but that these are things that we're highlighting, encouraging people to use. Extending and emphasizing grace, empathy, and understanding. And I would say this is really key for teams, because this is something not only do we want to espouse to share with our employees, but we want them to have that amongst their peer interactions as well, that grace, the empathy, and understanding are being extended across the board. Okay, well, stop eating the lollipops if they hurt your lips. Just stop. Okay. I went over this slide earlier, but just want to emphasize some of the mental health resources that I would encourage. Some of these are crisis and non-crisis resources, some that are traditional and then non-traditional as well. Okay, come sit with mama. Okay, come sit with mama. And then I want to highlight, I'm always big on like, what's the first domino? What are some things that you can do immediately to really focus on your mental health and well-being, but also that of your employees as well? So things around setting boundaries around work-life balance, admitting faults and apologizing when appropriate. Even as a leader, you can still apologize. Prioritizing mental health and well-being, delegating tasks, asking for help, saying no, implementing exercise, just moving your body, meditation, mindfulness, and we talked about taking breaks earlier as well. And these are things, again, this should be like a first domino. What are some of the things that I can start to implement immediately? So quick question before I wrap up the content. How can modeling healthy mental health habits really help and encourage employee mental health? If you guys don't mind sharing some responses in the chat. And again, that's how can modeling healthy mental health habits help employee mental health? Got hiccups. Tanisha says she likes the keyword. That's one of my favorite ones. Okay, go get your apple juice. It's in the refrigerator. My employees have mentioned that modeling healthy mental health habits makes them feel human. I love that. And I know you personally, so I know that you do that. Okay, look at mama's bag over there. It also, I would imagine, really like normalizes them opening up about the things that they're experiencing with their mental health, like feeling like they can be human with you. When employees see what's important to you, it becomes important to them. It really sets the tone. Yes, 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 yes.
Can I say that as far as like recognizing the mental health and and actually taking action and taking accountability with it. Can I say that it is, I feel like it's it starts the process of restoring folks, because we tend to not, we tend to be so, I guess, in our own circles or own personal worlds where we don't realize that we have to be accountable towards each other in regards to pulling us back together again, uplifting us and empowering us, and supporting us, and asking what is the need. And that's what accountability is for me when it comes down to mental health, as far as like on the job, because I get it so many times when we're in different organizations or on the meetings, and they ask us how are we feeling, and or how we're doing, and that knee-jerk reaction to say that we're okay. That's what happens with Black women, and we're not okay, because we got a whole billion things that we're having in crisis at home, but we will sit there and smile on the screen and be like, I'm okay, I'm okay today, and we're not. So I've learned to like be more mindful of myself, to say, and to tell others in those organizations, it's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to be honest, and open about it, because I think that's some of the DNA thing that we've carried throughout generations, and that is continuing to carry on that whole thing about the Black woman being strong, not being a victim, not being vulnerable, and that she's powerful, and it's magic. And it's not magic that makes us powerful. It's the resilience towards the impacted issues that we overcome, and try to like leap, as far as like obstacles. So I think it just makes us as employees and employers more mindful towards each other and trying to restore one another.
I appreciate that, and really appreciate like the intentionality, because to your point, like it's so important, especially for us as Black women, to create space for authentic responses and connection, of not just this, hi, how are you? I'm fine, how are you? Or I'm good. But like really creating space for people to be open to say, like, I'm not doing okay, I will be, but just creating more space for us to allow people to be really honest about how they're doing. And it's important because the more that we like push down the things that we're going through, like they continue to just kind of pop back up, you know what I mean? Like we push it down and it comes right back up. So it is really important for us to create space, create opportunities for us to be authentic and open in ways that make us feel comfortable, but also for us to do that with those that we work with as well.
Yeah, because it's like it's good to like be able to like express it, but it's even better when you say that you're family, when you say that you're a sisterhood, that like you intentionally be like, hey, like it's all hands on deck now. What can we do to restore you? What can we do to uplift you? What can we do to help you? And everybody come together on that logistically, on how to like whole, make that person whole again.
Yes, the support is key. Too often when someone is experiencing mental health issues, if it can feel very isolating, it can feel like I'm the only one going through this, and it can be very difficult to ask for help, but it's such a sign of strength. And it's one of the things that I think really makes us unique as Black women, is the emphasis, the uplifting nature of having support from others. And it's something that just I think it's very much a aspect of the Black girl magic that we all have. So I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. Okay, so a few other considerations that actually I'm going to skip this one because I normally show this to those that do not identify as Black, female, and femme. So I'm going to go ahead and skip this one. We have an idea of some of our cultural and gender considerations. I talked a little bit earlier about some of the kind of the quick supports that we can provide. That's things like making sure that we're really emphasizing resources that are already available, mental health check-ins. Like I did this cute check-in with my team because I'm a part of the Beehive. And it's like pictures of Beyonce, and it's like, which Beyonce are you today? And it's like different moods of Beyonce, just to kind of normalize, like it, you know, there's fun ways to talk about mental health and well-being, and there's fun ways to do check-ins. I've seen people do kind of like the emojis or heart different colors that kind of indicates how you're doing, so that you can provide additional support to those that identify that really need it. Break times, speakers, or training series. Also highlighting mental health days, months, or weeks. So we have like May coming up for Mental Health Awareness Month. July is named for B.B. Campbell Moore for BIPOC or Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. There's things like Suicide Prevention Month, self-care days, things like that. But highlighting those mental health days, weeks, or months can really start to normalize mental health as a part of the culture as well. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight some additional mental health resources, things like the crisis text line, National Suicide Hotline, making sure you're tapping into, and I encourage people to know about these, look these resources up within your community ahead of time. You shouldn't be clamoring for resources in a crisis. You should know local mental health hotlines, local ACT teams, or crisis teams that you can reach out to. And currently, one of the best resources for those that are experiencing suicidal ideations or active or passive behaviors, to reach out to 911. In many states, cities, they will also connect you to mental health resources, but currently that is one of the best resources for those that are experiencing mental health crisis. I want us to jump off. Okay. And I think the last slide is, if anyone wants to stay in contact with me, I've included my Black Girl Smile email, our website, our IG. The best way to get me specifically is through my Black Girl Smile email. That's just lcarson@blackgirlsmile.org. But I really appreciate you guys joining us today to learn a little bit more about ways that you can support your mental health and well-being as leaders, but also ways that you can support your employees, board, volunteers, to make sure that you're creating a culture of wellness and well-being. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Lauren, so very much. I'm not going to keep you ladies. I appreciate your time today. We have these Sage Circles every month on the fourth Thursday of the month. Next month, we have Spoon Consultory that will be talking about narrative building and high impact activations for us as Black women leaders. So we hope that you can join us. And on behalf of Southern Black Girls, if you want to contact us or stay connected with us, please feel free to reach out to us at heygirlhey@southernblackgirls.org. And we will stay in touch. Follow us on Instagram. I think it's Southern Black Girls, and Facebook. And that's it for today. Thank you so very much. Have a lovely day. We hope that this was we know it's important. We hope that you learned something today and you were able to connect to some things that you can use in resources further down the year. Have a great day.
Will the recording be available to us?
Yeah, yes, it will be.
Okay, all right.
We'll get it to you.